Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome to another episode of the Sweet Nothings podcast. If this is your first time here or it's been a little while, my name is Kelly, and here I whisper sweet nothings in your ear. This is your home of relaxed, funny, and informative chats all about the love of eating. We'll talk about the latest food trends, controversial opinions, and of course, all things edible. Today, I want to get into a little bit of popular culture, not just commenting on food in general, but commenting on some of the people who do food well. Chefs, cooks, and the big fancy famous ones. But before we get into discussing that as a concept, discussing your favourites, my favourites, let's talk about just a couple of silly things that have come up this month in food. In terms of food trends, me digging up the depths of food TikTok and frightening food related hashtags on Instagram and across the internet. Thankfully, there hasn't been a whole lot taking the internet by storm these past kind of couple of months. But in the last sort of 30 to 40 days or so, a couple of things have caught my eye. In particular, all incredibly UK focused. Though I am quite happy to say so because our food culture really does represent us perfectly as a nation. And those things are three. The first is that the New York Bagel Company, as in I think they're probably the biggest bagel brand in the UK, have started selling cookies and cream bagels. And I don't know where to begin with that. I don't mean to sound like a spoil sport when I pick on things like this, because a new flavour of something, yes, it's potentially exciting, but it's always got this somewhat terrifying spin on it when it's something that it feels like no one asked for. Do you know what I mean? I think the ones available generally from the New York Bagel brand are like the onion chive bagels, plain ones, maybe some cheese bagels. I think they have sesame ones. Occasionally in some shops you see kind of pumpkin spice ones or spiced ones around autumn and winter. And most of those would go with quite a lot of things, so it's quite understandable. I would love if they brought out kind of like a classic actual New York style everything bagel, the ones that have all the different kind of seeds and seasonings and stuff like that. You sometimes see whole wheat ones, but other than that, there isn't a huge amount of flavor. But cookies and cream, I feel like is just one of those flavors that just no one has ever bitten into a bagel and thought, do you know what I'm missing? Do you know what this needs? Specifically, Oreo biscuits and some vanilla flavoring. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe lots of people bite in and wish that they had that with their salmon and cream cheese or their peanut butter and honey. I don't know. You do you, honey, but it basically just seems to be like a regular bagel that's been sweetened a little bit that has like dark chocolate cookie biscuit crumb things through it. And I'm a hypocrite. I'll buy one if I see one. I'll buy a packet if I see one when I next visit, if they're still around, but it's just one of those things that doesn't need to be made. On a slightly more meme level, as we continue through some daft things I very much enjoyed in terms of food this month, Heinz, for some reason, unbeknownst to probably all of us except their marketing team, have decided to launch a ketchup pasta sauce. Now, I've already seen a few influencers been gifted this, and I've seen that it's only available for kind of like 3 to 4 weeks in most supermarkets or whichever shops they're stocking them in. Half of me is surprised it's taken as long as it has for them to branch out to make an actual ketchup pasta sauce, along with all the 3 billion products that Heinz have otherwise. I'll take the argument for dunking like pizza crusts into ketchup, but there's something about the concept of someone wanting to eat pasta with ketchup that just, I think I'd rather have it with margarine before reaching for the ketchup bottle, to be honest. And I felt like that before I had the deadly glares of Italians staring through my back at all times since living here. So I know it's gimmicky, it's meme level, it will get people talking, it's hype for a product that shouldn't exist, but let's leave that there. And the other kind of meme level food stuff that I came across, which I think is actually, I may have seen it beforehand, but I was reminded of it this month by a couple of different people sending it to me through Instagram DMs, that there was a, a fish and chip shop, or a chippy, whatever you want to call it. I always say chipper, in Scotland, that had battered and deep fried this podcast's nemesis, the Colin the Caterpillar chocolate caterpillar cake from M&S. If you're a long-time listener, or if you've listened to a few episodes, you'll know that Colin the Caterpillar just comes back to haunt the British public in a new form at least once every 2 months. And just Scotland's contribution to that just being to batter one and deep fry it is probably the proudest and most patriotic I've felt in a long time. It's the end that caterpillar deserves to meet, in my opinion. And honestly, having tried monstrosities such as the pizza crunch being a battered and deep fried pizza slice, and of course having had at least 2 bites of a deep fried Mars bar in my time, I can't say that I wouldn't try a deep fried chocolate caterpillar cake. I'd be lying if I said I wouldn't. But incredible that this stupid chocolate faced caterpillar shows up as much as it does in our lives, but here he is, back again. Honestly, other than that, the only thing that we're really seeing a rise of in terms of food news this month is, we're into the end of September, beginning of October now. So Christmas products are sneaking their head even through the shelves of the Halloween aisles in supermarkets and various other stockists. So it's likely to just be a barrage of various mixed up Halloween and Christmas marketing from now until January, basically, but there really hasn't been much on the go otherwise. So I think it's about time that we dove straight into what I want to chat to you guys about today, and that is the celebrity chef, the TV cook, the famous chef figure that has been present probably since the 1980s, mostly since the 1990s onwards, and just what on earth has happened to them, really. I got thinking about this for a couple of reasons. One was because of that that new advert that you see, I think, on YouTube videos and stuff like that. It's another one of the kind of collaboration things between Snoop Dogg and Martha Stewart. Martha Stewart being, I can't remember if she's American or Canadian, but she's a big name in, kind of family-friendly cooking over that side of the pond. And someone, a friend here in Italy, had asked who she was. And the same day, I came across an article that was actually written a couple of years ago, I think, or way back in 2019 even, about kind of the current absence of celebrity chefs or big famous TV chefs, TV cooks, the same way that we would have had, they were everywhere 20 years ago. Now there seems to be a real decline. And I just wanted to kind of expand on that because it was an article I found very interesting. I think I found it through The Guardian. And it got me thinking that it's pretty much right. Or, are these famous chefs, these famous cooking figures gone? Are they turning into something else? Are they rebranding? Or are we just seeing them on different platforms? Have we fallen out of favor with that? Is it no longer kind of sexy and trendy as a career like it was 10 years ago? So let's get into it. And then let's get into, slightly more lightheartedly, your favorites, my favorites, and let's celebrate whether the current concept still exists or the good of what it was. In the article I was talking about just a second ago, they referred a couple of times to the death of Anthony Bourdain, obviously fell hugely into the very popular celebrity chef, TV chef category. And they were kind of discussing whether his death was one of the things that maybe, I don't want to say soured people to the concept of the TV chef, but just to lose someone so beloved, so insightful, so charismatic, so experienced, so open-minded. Those are big shoes to fill, and perhaps it's just kind of created a bit of a hole in the space that no one's really been able to fill. And so people have looked for that kind of character elsewhere, if possible, that they just haven't found through mainstream media. And it then kind of got me thinking about perhaps there's a couple of other reasons that, again, much more modern problems that we weren't really facing the same way 10 to 20 years ago, that just we're not loving it anymore. Obviously, I think more of a kind of UK specific lens, but also with a bit of American kind of influence. You couldn't move for Gordon Ramsay about 10 years ago, 10, 15 years ago. He was everywhere. He was all over the TV in the UK. He was all over the TV in the US. He'd be back and forth. He'd be on chat. He'd be on talk shows. He'd have 2 of his own shows every single year. Jamie Oliver would be bumping out a book or a couple of different shows every year. Same with our queen, Nigella Lawson, Mary Berry. You know, all of these other really big names. You go further back, you would have had, you know, your Gary Rhodes, your Delia Smith, stuff like that. And it just seems like it's something that's not as common nowadays. Or perhaps this whole thing is just me realizing I don't watch very much TV anymore because my eyes are glued to YouTube instead. But I also wondered if this was potentially a kind of knock-on effect of that kind of post 80s and 90s luxury obsession that there was, the kind of financial boom that would have come with these decades. And, you know, the 80s, everyone was very into French cooking. They were into trying to recreate haute cuisine. You know, we were just really, the average Brit was only really beginning to talk about and understand Michelin stars and things like that through TV shows like MasterChef and things that you would see Marco Pierre White or Gordon Ramsay involved with. It's not a normal world for most people, but you know, there was certainly a taste for that kind of thing 20 or so years ago that there isn't really as much space for now. The world's a different place. Trends and fashions are very different, and we're all very skint. That also can't be ignored. So part of me wondered if, you know, part of the allure and the sex appeal and the excess and the glamour of following a chef who has 2, 3, 8 Michelin stars in these big fancy restaurants serving these tiny, tiny plates of food. You know, people who were into specifically luxury dining and they like the concept of tasting menus and they're fascinated by flavors, or, you know, someone like me who's just has a kind of hyper fixation on all things food because of their love for it. It's their main hobby, passion, the thing they love to talk about. These people will always exist and they have various names. But I don't know if that's something that intrigues the average person as much as it seemed to on TV a while ago. In the same way that, you know, thankfully, our hyperfixation on weight loss shows has deteriorated greatly since the time as well. But I couldn't help but wonder if it was that. I couldn't help but wonder if the kind of cost of living crisis that many of us are facing, or at least being wrapped up in at the moment, kind of makes the idea of a Michelin star restaurant or things being featured in a Michelin guide and these super successful, talented chefs just seeming a little bit irrelevant, you know? Of course, people are still interested in millionaires and in luxury and in fanciness and how the other half live, but it's something that definitely isn't kind of as in vogue. You know, instead, people are turning to thrifting. People are learning to cook at home more than they are just to watching the kind of super fancy or competitive element to some of these TV chef shows, you know. I also wondered briefly, just while scrolling through kind of the big names in the celebrity chef or TV chef, TV cook category, part of me wondered if for a lot of people in 2023, the gender imbalance or the, you know, huge prevalence of male chefs and very few female chefs could be the kind of thing that puts people off. Or, you know, along a similar vein, the most famous, the most prominent in the UK, bar a very select few, it's very white focused. You know, there a lot of these chefs they come from purely British backgrounds, therefore they'll provide mostly kind of British or European styles of cooking. They maybe dabble in other things, sometimes controversially. I don't think anyone's fully recovered from the Jamie Oliver chorizo and the paella debate. Gordon Ramsay opening up pan-Asian restaurants in the US, being from Glasgow, you know, nothing wrong with it inherently, but perhaps there's a lack of representation there. Perhaps, you know, women who want to cook don't necessarily want to learn from Marco Pierre White, who maybe seems like a symbol of an old fashioned style of kitchen that just isn't relevant or doesn't apply anymore. Perhaps people of not entirely British heritage living and working in the UK are sick of looking at Rick Stein and his fish dishes, and they want something a little bit more exciting, something that's a bit more representative of, I don't know, Caribbean culture, of Indian culture, Pakistani culture, Chinese culture that is very easy to find and to eat in the UK, but it's just something that seems to be pretty underrepresented in terms of the mainstream media. Though all that said, and all of that kind of pondered upon, I do think there will be elements of all of that. Obviously, we can't deny the fact that TV in general is a dying medium compared to what we spend most of, or at least what people under the age of 40 probably spend most of their time fixated upon, being TikTok, YouTube, Instagram, etc. But it also has to be noted, for example, on Disney Plus, that shows like The Bear have been hugely popular, all obviously, though dramatized, based around a kitchen. So it's not that the kind of concept of chef as a career seems to be losing its glitter and its appeal. If anything, it's a job, it's a career path that seems to have become more alluring to people through things like MasterChef and all of the other, even Bake Off, all of the other kind of equivalent cooking competition shows, people wishing to change into a career that's food focused, which 30 to 40 years ago was often considered something that you only did if you couldn't do anything else. And it also has to be noted that on TikTok and absolutely on YouTube, chefs creating their own content in their own kitchens are thriving, whether they're creating ridiculous, delicious, over the top chef quality food, but in a style that is accessible to everyone, or some of them even share great ways to meal prep. Some of them share ways to use really cheap ingredients to make good food. 5 different ways to cook one ingredient that you've maybe never thought about. Things that are just perhaps a bit more useful and, as I said, accessible to the everyday person who isn't going to be able to go and taste Gordon Ramsay's cooking, or going to be able to replicate perfectly a big Nigella Lawson style Christmas dinner feast because they share a flat in a city centre with 2 other people who have no more money than they do. It's is it kind of like the upsurge in interest in reality TV and in vlogging and in social media influencing in general? Do people want a glimpse into reality and utility more than they do luxury and escapism? It's like when you think of Bon Appetit on YouTube before the kind of big fallout, or Joshua Wiseman, for example, Matty Matheson, all of these other kind of people who are cooking on TikTok and on YouTube and making it bare bones, layman's terms cooking. They're making fabulous dishes and they're showing people great techniques, but they're doing it in a way that actually makes you think, oh, I could do that. They're not cooking with the finest, most expensive ingredients ever. They're just showing you how to make good food in your own kitchen. It serves as entertainment in the same way that the classic kind of celebrity chef, super luxurious thing did, but in a way that actually feels like there's a person on the other side, that even though they probably are being watched with just as many eyes as the TV chefs and celebrity ones were 10, 15, 20 years ago, but it feels like another person there, in the same way that a lot of people feel that way towards influencers versus the kind of Hollywood celebrity level. That makes sense. And it then made me want to kind of dig into, obviously, beyond that, a common theme between people's favorites. I asked you guys on Instagram if you'd be kind enough to share some of your favorite kind of celebrity chefs, TV cooks. And I have to say that though there were the obvious big names in there, a bulk of my followers are from the UK, obviously, many in the US and some across Europe. But a common theme, at least from responders to this very one specific Instagram story in 2023, it's not the most accurate and wide-ranging group to source from. However, a common theme was really that kind of accessible, down to earth, realistic feel. I think is what seems to be what people want from this kind of figure now, which is very interesting. I'm someone who makes recipe videos and food content and posts them on the internet. I couldn't possibly compare myself to, the men and women who've been writing cookbooks or the ones who've been training and working in kitchens for decades. Never would. But it's fascinating to see that a lot of the things that people want from these kind of figures now is something that you could find for free on the internet rather than for, you know, paying lots of money to go into a fancy restaurant or waiting another week to watch another installment on TV of this superstar chef. So digging into your favorites, the name that came up above them all, which is both unsurprising and very, very pleasing to me because she will forever and ever and ever be in my top list of names, is Nigella Lawson. I feel like she is someone who transcends your background, your race, your gender, everything. She's just iconic, not only in British culture because of her sensual way of being, the way she speaks, the way she looks unavoidably, and how long she's been around. She's this kind of wonderful mix of, cozy, loving mother figure and, little minx in the kitchen at the same time. And the food she makes can be from the ridiculous, outrageous, and over the top to the most cozy and nostalgic and comforting. The way she writes about food makes me want to weep when I read it, whether it's just the recipes you see on her website or from her books. Sadly, with me at the moment, I don't have them, but back home in Scotland, I have at least 6 or 7 of her books that have been well thumbed, if not actually used for the recipes, then read on more than one occasion, if anything, just to see how she describes things, and the way that she puts sentences together brings hunger out in you. And the skill it takes to do all of that, I think, is what keeps her just eternally in the public eye, even after scandal that she's been wrapped up in and having had for certain points a very unfortunate life. Her books, her shows, her recipes. She's just someone that people turn to and think of when they think of celebrity cook, I guess, because she's not a chef and never professes to be. And it's she's one of those people that, much like Anthony Bourdain, I think that those would be enormous shoes to fill. Her absence would just leave a big hole that would take a very impressive person to fill. Unsurprisingly, we also saw Gordon Ramsay come up quite a lot. People love the way he talks, the anger, the attitude, the range. Let's be honest, that man has done everything from hotels to cafes to restaurants all over the world, whether you like him or not. And he's been around for a very, very long time and is also making a bit of a name for himself on social media as well. Similarly, Jamie Oliver, a lot of people had praise for, though he's obviously a bit more slightly controversial when he tries to dabble in politics and stuff to do with the food industry as a whole. And his restaurants aren't quite as popular as his kind of TV shows and books, etc., from what I understand anyway. He's a figure that's been around for a long time for a reason. He's one of the kind of celebrity big name chefs that's made cooking easier and more accessible for a lot of people, even if you're not a big fan. Mary Berry was a name that came up a lot. She's been around forever. She's probably, much like Nigella, it's a name you could Google next to almost any dish and she would probably have written a recipe for it at some point. Probably not so well known among younger generations because she's not really one on social media that much. And obviously she's, probably earned her time off at this point, but she's been on TV and writing books and all sorts of things for a long time. And she's the kind that makes very reliable, classic recipes too. Nigel Slater, I was very, very happy to see come up multiple times. Much like Nigella, his writing is half of what cooks me in. The food is almost like I said cook instead of hook. His writing is half of what hooks me in. He's a fabulous, fabulous, fabulous writer, makes glorious recipes. Never kind of your everyday stuff for most people, but always something a little bit unusual. He's very kind of focused on the seasonal, very focused on flavor, just really, really lovely, cozy stuff. Other mentions for the slightly jollier but very TV friendly options were Ainsley Harriott of Ready Steady Cook fame, um, and of Hello Jill fame, and also the Haiti Bikers. Them and Ainsley Harriott, very, always very popular on TV, got the perfect kind of personality for presenting while cooking and for sharing recipes that are very normal, down to earth. Anthony Bourdain came up a lot, both for his writing, for his TV shows, and for the food. Again, much like Nigel Slater, the food is almost something that comes secondary with Anthony Bourdain. He's almost a separate entity. His TV shows one thing, his books another. In terms of the kind of more YouTube famous, Joshua Wiseman and Claire Saffitz from Bon Appetit were names that came up a lot from you guys, understandably. Claire is wonderful to watch, and really makes you feel like you can do the things that she's doing, which not everyone's capable of presenting. Joshua Wiseman, again, fantastic, fantastic content, and really kind of tuned into making dishes accessible and affordable and good for normal, everyday working people, not just for cooking for big families, which not everyone has, or entertaining for dinner parties, which not everyone has, or cooking in huge kitchens, which not everyone has. And of course, a few Italian mentions popped up from my Italian listeners, my Italian followers. Giuseppe Delano being the winner of the Great British Bake Off, I want to say 2 or 3 years ago now. Fabulous baker, obviously, and just a lovely, lovely guy to watch both on social media and when he's on TV. He was great fun on Bake Off. I loved him. And of course, has fantastic, fantastic taste himself. Similarly, we had Alessandro Borghese and Giorgio Locatelli, who are big, big names, especially Locatelli in Italian cooking. Locatelli being also a little bit famous in the UK for his London restaurants and of being a bit higher quality, but he's also one of those personalities that makes you feel comfortable with the concept of cooking and with a kitchen. And of course, Gino D'Acampo, who at this point is as British as he is Italian, I think, in terms of culture and the memeability of his personality. But someone, again, who has introduced a lot of British people to Italian food through his TV appearances, through his books, and just through his very electric way of being as well. And a couple of others I wanted to add, aside from my kind of love for Anthony Bourdain, for Nigel Slater, for Nigella Lawson. A favourite that no one else popped up that is a big, big, big time favourite of mine was Keith Floyd. Again, along the lines of Mary Berry, perhaps not a name or a face that younger generations or people outside of the UK will have seen very much of, but Keith's style of cooking and drinking while cooking, and the way he spoke about food, the way he ate, the way he saw food, and the way he saw the people he was cooking for was something I always found very, very refreshing and very unique. He, being on TV more in the kind of 80s and 90s when things were very much more laced up the back, you had people like Fanny Craddock, you had Delia Smith, who, though fabulous recipes, everything was all very well measured and very professional. Whereas Keith Floyd, it felt like he was your half-drunk uncle cooking for you in the kitchen, talking to you about his ridiculous life stories and pouring you a good glass of wine to have with whatever he was concocting. And I love that. I love that style of cooking. And I feel like he's another character that, though it's been a long time since he was on our screens, he's another kind of character that people warm to that will be very difficult to replace, much like your Anthony Bourdain and, when further down the line, people like Nigel Slater and Nigella Lawson, just someone that draws you in not only with the food, but the way that they talk and express their feelings about and treat the food. It's not just an art like it is in Michelin star cooking. It's not just a science like it is in baking. It's all of these things wrapped up in culture, wrapped up in family, wrapped up in a little bit of chaos, all in one thing. And I think he was fabulous for capturing that. He was also one that, at least from what I've seen, seemed to pay a great deal of respect to the ingredients and to the place he was in. If he was cooking in France, he would be speaking to whoever he was with. In French, he would be using French ingredients and paying respect to French recipes. The same if he was in Italy or if he was in Spain, which is something that you certainly didn't see every TV chef or celebrity chef doing back in the day. And to see someone travel so much before it was fashionable, like it is now in the days of kind of travel blogging and Instagram, was also very, very unique and very refreshing. And this is a kind of a concept, a figure that I'm very, very interested to see how the kind of idea of a famous chef or a famous cook develops over the years. I think definitely the big names in YouTube and TikTok are going to be here for a while, but it will be interesting to see if we ever see big names and big figures, recipe book writers and presenters and cooks and chefs that kind of divert from the kitchen to the media. It will be very interesting to see if that is ever a thing again, come 5, 10 years. Will people still be buying recipe books in the same way, or will we be entirely dedicated to video content? Who knows? But it's just something that, as I said, after the discussion about Martha Stewart and after reading that article about Anthony Bourdain, it's very interesting that we've seen such a big shift over the past kind of 15 to 20 years and where that's going. Is there still a place for a figure like this? Are we all just focused on scraping by and eating and cooking what we can afford now more than we have for a long time? Or will we kind of bounce back as history and as fashions do to being into luxury and excess and the ridiculous, the lobster and the gold leaf instead? Who knows? But it's just something I wanted to talk about. I was very interested to see who you guys were inspired by, who you loved watching and learning from and reading from, and of course seeing if there was any crossover with the figures that I've loved as well. Do let me know, whether it's in social media comments, if you're watching on YouTube, let me know in the comments underneath. What's your thought? Why are these figures kind of more specifically catering to the average person now? Do we prefer a certain kind of personality? Is this a changing fashions kind of thing? Why do you think the celebrity chef is morphing a little bit, if they are at all? Or do you think it's something that is dying out and only a very few sparkly ones are remaining from their glory days? Let me know what you think. But I'm afraid that is all I kind of have prepared to talk to you guys about today. I thank you as always, always, always for your contributions. You guys help me so much with your suggestions and by answering questions or offering questions when I ask for them on YouTube and Instagram and stuff. If you're listening just on audio, don't forget to follow me at Maverick Baking everywhere if you haven't already done so. If you'd like to have a say, if you'd like to ask questions or respond to anything when I'm podcast prepping next. And thank you so, so much for listening as always. And I will see you for the next one.